Hey everybody, DJ here, and today we are going to be doing some epic text. I don't know how many episodes this is going to be or how many parts, but you should end up with something really awesome by the end. We're going to be using some fairly beginner and advanced techniques so anybody at any level can take this project course and learn a thing or two. Before we begin, please take a moment and like and subscribe. That really helps me out with the channel. So here we are in Blender, and this is just the default settings here. On the bottom left, you can see that I have my screencast keys on, and I also have on the very bottom left, you can see that the keyboard and the mouse is there just in case these stop working or something else, or if you just need this because it's easier for you to see on the keyboard what I'm doing. And I just kind of want to go over very briefly, if I can, why I want to do this and why it's important. So this is sort of like the working project that I did for the still images that you saw. You can create an animation or something with this. And what I noticed is that in my portfolio that I've used to get numerous jobs in the business is that text is a big deal. Being able to do something like this with a either logo or the text of the company or just for your own name and using that as a sort of like your logo for yourself is really important. So I wanted to make sure that I covered this, and as with all of my tutorials, really, I try to cover things that I know helped me get jobs, whether it was a full time position or just some spot work here and there for contract work. Doing this type of thing is really important to learn, and doing it right and making some very unique uh, texts and different sort of techniques to create something interesting with text. And Blender is not always the easiest. To be fair, it's one of the only few 3D programs I've ever used, and there are a lot of ways to do the same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start here. We're going to go ahead and delete this default cube. And generally, what I would say the first thing you'd want to do is know what you're doing first. I know that sounds like a little bit strange, but basically, you kind of want to know what the end result is that you're looking for. But really, I'm going to try and show you how to make similar to what I made in the thumbnails that I showed or the still frames that I showed before we started this tutorial. So the first thing that we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to start to add. So that's a Shift A there. We're going to add a text. So here we go, right here, text. And it starts off with this little thing here that just says text. And if we go over to the right and you go down on your list over here, you can click on this panel and you get a bunch of information over here. And I'm just going to pull this over so you can see what's going on. So we're just going to collapse the shape part here, and we're going to collapse the paragraph part, and we're just going to look at a few things kind of like in detail, more than what I think most other tutorials who try to go into this will talk about. So the first thing here is geometry. So you can see here, and we're just going to minimize this bevel here. You can see here that we have an extrude. So if I hold shift here, or if you don't hold shift, it kind of goes crazy. But if you hold shift, left click and drag, you can see that it pulls the text out into a three-dimensional form. So you might think, oh, cool, I'm done. That we're going to do a little bit more detail into how we create all this stuff, but that is how you can extrude a very basic 3D text. The next thing here is the taper object, which is really more of a advanced technique that I'm not going to go over in this video because it doesn't really apply, I think, for text. So we're going to ignore that. The next part right here is bevel. And if you hold shift and left click and drag, you can see that you're basically creating rounded beveled edges to your text. And you can change the resolution to make it really sharp like that, or you can increase the resolution to make it more rounded. And usually this is where a tutorial might say, okay, cool, you have this rounded, and then we're going to apply this and do something else. But we're going to do a lot more complex stuff than just this basic thing here. So I'm sure that half of the people watching this have already done a text tutorial, and they're looking for something more. Or if you haven't, I'm going to be teaching you some really cool stuff that you can do besides just these couple basic things here. Now, the next thing that we're going to go into font in a minute, but let's go into the shape here. So this is basically the preview of how much resolution is in your shape. So it's kind of like how complex everything is. So if we take this way down, you can see that it's becoming less complex with the preview here. And if we increase that, you can see that it's increasing the subdivisions there. So let's put that back to, I think it was at 12. And then the render, if it's, see right here, if it's set to 0, it uses the preview resolution. And this is fine for now. We're not really going to do much with this part at the moment. Then there's the fill mode right here. And if you click none, then you just get this outline. So if that's what you're looking to do, very cool. And then if we go back, it just does the back, and then you get this sort of thing here. And front, same thing except for reversed. And then both, which does both the bottom and the top, and all the sides here. So now what I want you to do is think about this. The text that we are going to be manipulating, there should be a good amount of thickness in the line work here. So a script text, if I can, well, I'll show you how to do it in a moment, but a script text, and I'm sure you know what I mean, ones that are like really flowery and have a lot of curves and stuff like that, wouldn't really be the best to use here. What you want is something kind of chunky, kind of like impact or something like that. And the one that I'm going to be using is called Bauhaus, but you can go onto whatever website. If you have Adobe, you can download their text formats or their fonts. And if you don't have any, you can go to different font websites. I'm not going to post any on here because, to be honest, sometimes they have some malware and stuff like that, and I don't want to be held responsible for any issues. But do your research, find a good free text website to find some fonts that you like, or just use whatever's in Microsoft that you like. I think Impact is in there. So at this point, you can stop the video, go and find a text that you really think will work, or download a couple, or just go through the text that's on your computer and see what you like, and then go ahead and press start. Okay, so hopefully you picked your font, and what we're going to do here is we're going to go down into this setting here where it says font, and we're going to change this, and instead of, see where it says regular, we're really just going to use one font here. We're going to change this. We're going to go to the files here, and you can see that I already have it set to fonts. You can find out how to navigate to that if you do some Google searches and all that, depending on which operating system that you're in. And something like this here, let me make these a little bit bigger. So let's make it large. So something like this, that's really nice and chunky. The Arial is pretty good. The Arial bold right here, something like that is really gonna work well. This is another one for black. That's basically a much thicker version of that. So some of that stuff will work pretty well. But what I want to use is this Bauhaus one here, Bauhaus 93. And that's the one that I used in the images that I showed before the tutorial really started. And I think that it's a really cool look, and it's kind of like futuristic and stuff like that. But you can pretty much use any of them that have a nice thick line. Be careful of stuff like this one that has this very thin line. You're going to run into some issues there. So really what you want is something nice and thick and even like that. So we're going to go ahead and pick this Bauhaus one here. And you can see it already looks kind of cool, but we're not going to use, in the geometry setting, we are not going to use the extrude. So go ahead and set that to 0 for now. And bevel, you can see here, even though we don't have any extrude, you can see that it's kind of extruded a bit because of the bevel amount. Let me open up the bevel. But we're going to set this to 0 right now. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating the geometry based on a curve. Okay? And we're going to be using this right here, the object set, to create a curve for the beveling and the depth of this entire text object here. But before we start to do that, what you need to do is make sure that you don't just have text in here. You need to have whatever it is that you're looking to create. Now, for me, I'm just going to do the D.J. Oops. D.J. for DJ tutorials, but do whatever you think is going to work for yours. And don't worry about the spacing and any of that at the moment. We will be able to fix that later. But really, write down what you want it to be. The shorter, sometimes the better, or if you end up stacking a longer one, a longer word or a phrase together, it can work. But something short like this should help, or, your initials or something along those lines. But this is what I'm going to be starting with here. So let's go ahead and collapse this down a bit. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a curve that's going to, again, generate the bevel and the overall depth and extrusion of our object. So from here, we're going to, and make sure you're not in edit mode anymore, go to Shift A to add, and we're going to go to curve. And what we're going to do here, let's go up to the, go up to the top. There's Bezier, circle, all these sort of things here. Let's just do a point, okay? And there's a reason for this. So we're just going to do a point, and we're going to go into edit mode. So make sure that you're in edit mode up here. And I'm going to select that point, and I'm going to move it right over here, okay? And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to split the panel into a couple different views so we can really see what's going on inside of our project. So we're going to split it once here, and I'm going to hit N to get rid of this, and I'm going to hit T to get rid of that. And then we're going to split it one more time like this, okay? And with this one, I'm going to zoom in kind of like this. And with this view, I'm going to sort of make sure that all of my object is in the view here, okay? Something like this. But whatever, you'll see why I'm doing this in a moment. I don't always like to do this kind of thing and not explain it, but I'm just setting this up for you so that things kind of make sense as we start to build here. So next thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and we're actually going to make sure that this point is selected, hit E to extrude, and then Y to pull it down on the Y axis. Okay? And I'm going to hit, I'm actually going to leave this here and I'm going to turn it like this. I'm going to rotate this with R, and then I'm going to rotate this with R as well to sort of create this sort of curve shape here. And then, just to show you what we're doing and why we're doing it, we're going to select the text. And then over here, where it says bevel, you're going to click this eyedropper, and we're going to go over to the curve. Okay? And a whole bunch of weird stuff just happened. Okay? So don't worry about that. So go back to the curve. Let's hit tab to go into edit mode. Select all of it with left click select. Make sure that your box select is up here. Left click and drag to select both. Grab it on X and move it to the left. Or sorry, to the right. And you can see, let's get this back to where we can see what's going on here. You can see that this curve is now creating the bevel and the depth of the font. And where we move this on the axes is basically creating the overall depth that we're looking for here. And you can see if I move this over a little bit extreme, you can start to see a lot of issues showing up, okay? And if we look here, you can see that there's a lot of issues there. And this is why I said you want to get one that's really nice and thick. If you get one with like some thin lines and stuff like that, you end up with these sort of issues a lot more often. And that'll be more prevalent as we start building stuff. And you might change the font that you use depending, but let's just go ahead and move on here. So what I have found to work out the best is taking all of these right here, hit S0, and then take these here. If you left click and drag to select that point, S0, and we're basically getting rid of those Bezier handles, okay? And we're just going to deal with a very basic, sort of like blocky version of the bevel that we're going to create for our text here. So if we take these here and we move them over to the x-axis, or sorry, to the y, and let's move it down. It's actually, yeah, that's fine. It's kind of moving, but that's fine. Yeah, so there we go. So if we move that back down where it was, and if you want, you can actually center this. So if I go Y and I move this here, It's set kind of like on 0 here, and you can see that it's cutting the x-axis and the y, the 2D plane there, right in half. That's fine. You can kind of do it however you want. But basically, what we want to do here is we want to start extruding and moving some of this stuff around. And what I would recommend doing is I'm going to hit S, Y, or let's actually make sure that you guys are set on this correctly. If you go up here, make sure that your transform pivot point is set to a median point. That means like between the two. And we're going to go SX0 just to make sure that both of these points are exactly in the right spot or the same spot on the x-axis. And that's going to make it to where the top depth and the bottom depth are the same. You can make them different, but for right now, we're just going to keep them the same. And just to show you how this works, I'm going to select both of these. I'm going to right click. I'm going to subdivide. And I'm going to subdivide this, let's do 4 times. Okay. And I'm going to take this and this. I'm going to grab it on the x-axis and pull it over. And then I'm going to take these and I'm going to scale those on 0. So those handles are no longer there. And if you take a look here, you can see that it's basically matching. If we look at this right here, that bevel right here is matching this right here. Okay, pretty cool, right? And if you take these and let's say we subdivide this again, let's do it by 2. And we'll take these guys and we'll scale those in on 0 and move them. You can see that we're making custom bevels for our text. Okay. And if we're looking at it on this one here, just kind of to look at everything, what we want to make sure that we don't see is stuff like, let's try moving this over. So what we want to avoid is stuff like this, okay? See that? So that's not going to be something that we can fix very easily. So you don't want to do that. So I'm going to undo real quick. And just be very conscious of that as you're building your shape here. Now for this bottom, maybe this is not the sort of look that you want. You want it to be a little bit more blocky. So if we grab this and grab it on the X and pull it over, you can see that we are now straightening that up or changing that and manipulating the bevel and how the shaping of this object is basically coming together. So my general advice at this point is play with this and get this to a point that you really, really like, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull over a curve that I already did, and let me place it in here. I'm going to copy it and paste it from my other file. Let's see, where is it? So here it is here. Ah, there it is. It's way up there. So let's put that back here. And I'm just going to turn off the one that we created that's currently called point. And this is the one that I made. Okay, and you can see that for me, I have this back here. It's not even 100% even. It's kind of tapered a little bit. And if I take this and instead of, just to show you what I did over here, the object instead of the point, I'm going to take it and change it to this plane here. It looks like it moved it. Let's move that down here. And as you can see, what I did here is I created this very fine bevel along the top edge here. Let's actually change how this looks so you can see it a little bit easier. I'm going to turn on matte cap. So if I go here, go to matte cap, change this to, let's do this red one here. You can see it kind of a little bit easier what I've done. And what I wanted was to create a light effect on the inside. Okay. So I not only did the beveling on the outside, but I also extruded it on the inside. And this edge that's pointed in right here, and it's easier if I kind of do it like this. Let's actually move over here a little bit. And I'm actually going to change this to something that maybe will show it a little bit easier. Let's try this. So this edge right down in here, okay, that is being created right here. Okay, so if I take this one and I move it, you can see how that bevel is being done, and then this one here, how that bevel is being done. This here, and up here, you can also see how the shaping is being manipulated. Okay, and then this one, that's actually that inside set bevel. So I wanted it to angle in. And then basically from there, that's the inside shape of the text. So my recommendation, play with it. If you want to match what I did here, this is what it looks like. And I would recommend having it beveled on the inside and inset because there's a really cool light effect that we can do. And from this point right here, what you can do is save your project, file, save as, and we're going to call this 3D text part 1 demo. That's what I'm going to call it. Save that. And from here, you can take your text and you can rotate it on the x-axis, and now it's sitting up on what will end up being the ground plane. Okay? So that's going to be it for this tutorial. And the reason why is because I want you to really play with this and get what you want it to look like. And I will show you again on the screen right here. This is what my final ended up looking like. So really think about it. Come up with something really fun and complex, whether it's a name of a company that you already know, whether it's a name of a company that you want to make, or whatever it is. Um, Really make this look really cool, and that will make the rest of it so much more exciting and fun because you'll be able to create something that you can really use for your portfolio, and it's going to look amazing. And I'm going to show you how to do all the volumetric lighting. I'm going to show you how to do all of the shading and the materials and the rendering, so don't worry about all that. Just make sure that you spend the time you need to make this look really nice before moving on to the next part, and I will see you next time on DJ Tutorials.